Big. And here we are. So welcome to the Sustainable Procurement Pledge meeting with the GEP and Satyarthi, all about how we can tackle one of the biggest challenges not just in business, but in society in the world today, which is the challenge of child labour. And we have, as I said, formed this wonderful partnership with a wonderful group of people, and a huge thanks especially to Desiree, I must say, in the SPP team, but also the other guys, Crystal and Charlie, Derek and others are part of the other organisations that have been involved. Thank you so much for pulling this together. It is incredibly exciting. So thank you very much for helping us all put this together. So we do have quite an extraordinary 90 minutes ahead. As I said, there'll be plenty of opportunities to ask questions, so please do. And as I said, a huge opportunity to really delve into this. We want, as all SPP things to be, this to be personal. So you'll hear about what you can do as a procurement professional, what you can do to make a difference, but we'll also make it practical. We'll hear exactly what you can do to act now, what the challenges are, and so on. So hopefully that will be an experience you'll enjoy. So who have we got with us today? An extraordinary panel. As I said, delighted to be joined by Kailash Satyarthi, who is, of course, Nobel Peace Prize Laureate from 2014, who will be joining us, who has had an extraordinary life and is doing extraordinary things. Equally as important to this call, it's Imtiyaz, who you'll be hearing from very shortly, who had equally had an extraordinary experience and is now taking that experience further to do work alongside Kailash. Thomas Uderson, CPO of Bayer, and of course co-founder of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, to help bring an understanding of what this means for procurement and procurement professionals, and Neha as well from GEP, the founder and president of GEP. And delighted to have all four of you. They will introduce themselves as they get talking, so you will be able to find out a little bit more about them. If you do at any point have any questions for them, of course, we will be taking questions towards the end of the session, but we do want lots of questions. So do put those into the chat, and the team may actually answer some of those as we go through the session itself. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing so we can actually get started on this. And I'd like to ask you, Thomas, perhaps to forward first, and obviously give a reflection on the pledge and what it means, but also what you're doing and what procurement professionals need to be thinking about in terms of this session and when they're thinking about child labour.
Yeah, no, and thanks, really. And I see so many people, 140 by now, and of course we are recording this, so the message will get out and will reach a lot of people. And I'm really super happy that we have this chance to actually talk about a topic which is not just important, serious, but it's also very, very urgent. And I think we probably have the expert, the one who has been dedicating his life as a role model to address this topic with Kailash ji. So we really thank you very much for being here. And I don't know if everybody knows it, but I think Kailash, you know that you know, our lives have been sort of intertwined through my daughter. So as she was going through the humanities exercises in her class, you know, there was one person that came across as being totally inspirational, really dedicating life to change the world, and that's where you got introduced to me, and I was so lucky that Neha actually happens to know you, and you know, in a way the rest is history. But I'm so thankful that you take the time to help us, you know, become better in also addressing this topic. And as I said, it's not a new topic, unfortunately. It's a topic that has been on the agenda for many years. I think already as I went back in ILO, you know, started to talk about this topic of eliminating child labor, making sure everybody had a chance to get their childhood back in '86, and they also came up with the aspiration to eliminate this real unacceptable topic by 2025. So basically 3 years ahead of us. But it's not only on that. Many of us in procurement roles are very familiar with the United Nations Global Compact principles that were introduced in 2000. You know, so far, 15,000 companies have signed up for this, and of course, as we talk to procurement practitioners, we also have a chance to look a little bit under the surface and say what is really going on. And what we hear from many is, you know, it's not necessarily as great as the document looks like. And I think the consequence of that is exactly what we see now. We still have this issue with an estimated 160 million children out there who is really being, again, robbed of their childhood. So many great ambitions, lots of great work happening also at a local level, but obviously we have not solved this issue just yet. So you know, it's complex. It's a very complex topic, and it's probably also very difficult to put one accountability with anybody. But if there is one accountability, I would say it's not with any of us individually. It's with all of us as adults. I think it's really a problem that we need to engage with and certainly come with new solutions here. I think we have seen that the topic of climate change more recently has, of course, received a lot of attention. Most recently also with COP26, I think there is not a single procurement person out there who is starting to look at how can we optimize our CO2 footprint, how can we reduce scope 1, 2, 3, how do we help minimize biodiversity, and that's all fantastic. You know, we absolutely need to do that. But of course, one of the risks in having this very visible media attention around climate change is that other really, really important topics may not be as visible to us as actually they should be. And that's also why I really, Kailash, wanted to thank you that you can just make sure that we are not you know, putting this on the back seat, because it is really a big problem that I think we also have a chance to look at it. If I now put on my practitioner hat, so you know, I'm like many of you a procurement practitioner, and of course we try to address this topic, but it's one of the more difficult topics for us to address. I think we have a lot of wording captured in our codes of conduct. Of course, we have contracts, we have terms and conditions that say this is totally unacceptable, because it is unacceptable. But many of the checks and balances that exist across corporations with online assessments or on-site audits doesn't seem to really have the impact that we want to have. There seems to be a bit of a chronic nature here in topics certainly around labor conditions, but also topics around inclusion, diversity, and quite frankly also with sustainable procurement. And that's of course one of the things that we are trying to address as SPP. Some rather both I guess encouraging news, but also some heartbreaking news is that EcoVadis, which is one of the assessment providers out there, they are every year giving an update on what have they seen across 65,000 companies. And they can show over the last 5 years that a lot of stuff has really happened. We see clear improvements around environmental protection, practices when it comes to ethicals, etc. But we have seen a steady decline in labor conditions and sustainable procurement. And that's us. You know, there is clearly a call out for us to also then start to do things a little bit better. And maybe the approaches sitting with assessments in comfortable countries far away of the risk areas is not one that really has the impact, and maybe different approaches with local partners is really becoming necessary. So I think here a chance for us to also hear how can we maybe partner with local partners who is competent in the conditions on the ground, who understands the regulatory framework, the cultural framework, who also knows how to partner with law enforcement to address those issues. So I'm personally super excited to hear a little bit more about how we can do it, because I don't think we are really good enough as it stands right now. And with this, I just want to hand over to Neha, because you are, of course, a person who has been observing lots of industries and lots of companies in their practices, and you even have some very cool articles, you know, in very impressive magazines. So maybe you can also share a bit of a perspective on what you see across industries and where do you see good practices or maybe not so good practices.
Sure. Thank you, Thomas. And thank you to everyone who's joined this very timely, very important session. with, of course, the main guest being Imtiyaz Ali and, of course, Kailash Satyarthi. So thank you all for joining. My name is Neha Shah. I am the president and one of the co-founders of GEP, which focuses on supply chain and procurement solutions and services. Of course, we've had a long-term relationship with Thomas and Bayer for over 11 or 12 years. And in the last 4 years have developed a very close relationship with Kailash ji, his organization, as a corporate partner in their mission to eradicate and eliminate child labor. I was certainly one of the people a few years ago who thought, of course, we read articles, we thought about it once in a while, that we would read about a story of a clothing factory in Bangladesh or cocoa farms. But after really spending time educating myself and colleagues and hearing about and learning truly the depth of Kailashji's life's work and the real facts and statistics around this, we realized that it is one of the most important issues of our time. It has existed for a very, very long time. And what I also learned is that these issues, Thomas, to your point, they exist in every industry. We think about it in the garment industry or in certain particular industries, but based on, again, a lot of research, speaking with the experts, it is very clear that it exists throughout industries, either directly in the first tier of supply chain, maybe in the second, third tier, but it does exist. And as my close friend at Kailash Satyarthi's foundation reminded me, it is very clear that until we first are aware and acknowledge that that problem exists, we won't be able to identify real solutions. And the fact is, it's extremely complex. It's not as easy as just finding alternate sources, or there's many conditions around this, economic, social, and otherwise, but it has to be done. Thomas talked about the UN, and of course, eliminating it in 2025. They designated 2021 as bringing this awareness around the year for the elimination of child labor. But in fact, as we've seen through this pandemic, the numbers have been going in the wrong direction. So Kailashji, who you're going to be hearing from, and many others supporting him, organizations, have spent their lives creating change, creating awareness, changing public policy with governments, institutions across the world. But as this organization, the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, proves, we know that with any topic around sustainability, whether it's climate change, scope 1 through 3 emissions, it is the private sector, it is the corporations who spend and transact trillions of dollars each year that have to be fully engaged in this problem, who have to be committed to its elimination. And it is us, all of us on this meeting, and those of our colleagues who are in procurement and supply chain, both the professionals in corporations, the providers like us at GEP, who are in this very critical seat of first bringing awareness to our corporations, to our leadership, asking the right and tough questions that we have to ask, and then making this issue, along with many others in sustainability, the corporate priority to put more financial and human investment to make an impact. Some of my friends shared with me that the EU Parliament, just this past month, are trying to pass legislation which will hold the corporations accountable for any human rights abuses in their supply chain. Because as Thomas mentioned, the voluntary efforts of due diligence, spot audits are not sufficient. In fact, I would argue completely insufficient to make any meaningful change. So what is required now, and it's imperative, and we will go into more specific actions because we do want to, of course, hear from our main guests, but what are those specific financial investments, human investments in terms of creating specialized teams, innovations, and bringing the full power of the digital innovations, data and technology to this problem and making this the priority for corporations. These children are our children. And although many of the issues as climate change is very important, and we're all hearing that time is ticking for our Earth, but equally, the time has been ticking on our future generations for far too long. Kailash has spent his life trying to do that, but we all must join this journey to fixing it and creating those practical solutions, which, like I said, we'll talk more at the end of our session around some of those specific ideas and how you can get more involved. But right now, for the sake of time, I'd like to turn over the discussion first to an amazing young man, amazing survivor, Imtiyaz Ali, who is going to share his courage, his inspirational short story with all of us. So Imtiyaz, over to you.
Namaste. My name is Imtiyaz Ali and I am from Bihar. I am the eldest one in my family. My mother was domestic worker and my father is a daily wage laborer. At the age of 9, I was trafficked along with seven more children to work. And so we were brought to Delhi in embroidery factory. I was happy coming to Delhi and enjoy the food. But that doesn't last with good consequences. The next day, when they put me to work for hours and hours, I have realized that the trafficker has lured us in the false promises for better life. I was asked to work with the thin needles with my tiny hands. My fingers was pricked while working on and many times leading to injuries. Once I was ill, so I want to take rest. As I slept, the employer slapped me and abused me. He brought the scissors in front of my eyes. I started crying and thought that they will take my eyes off. I was forced to work 16 to 18 hours a day, and then BBA activists rescued 84 children, and I was one of them. Then I was sent to my parents. Later on, I come to Balashram, Rajasthan. Balashram is a rehabilitation center for freed bonded child laborers. I stayed in Balashram for 10 years, and this is my home. I received non-formal education in Balashram, and then I enrolled in nearby government school for formal education and complete my senior high school. I also learned Indian classical music by Bhaviji, Miss Sumedha Kailash, and learned to play other musical instruments as well. Last year, before joining college, I went back to home from Balashram to meet my family. I raised awareness through the survivors network group in my and nearby village about child labor, child trafficking, and importance of education for children. Now I am nursing student. Today, millions of children are still working in the business supply chain. I was among them many years ago. It is the primary responsibility of every business and manufacturing companies to make sure that there is no single child involved in the process of making goods. I wanted to tell everyone that every child must be safe, free to dream, and free to get education, and free from all kinds of slavery and exploitations. And I want each one of you to be that voice. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imtiyaz. What a story. And Imtiyaz, thank you so much for sharing that. I've read quite a bit about your story today, and it has been exceptionally inspiring. So, and thank you for presenting today. You've done a fantastic job. If you ever want a job in presenting on these things, you'd be very, very welcome. And thank you for your time. And I hope everyone has listened to your words. I'd like to play a small video now that tells a bit more of the story around what the work that Kailash and Imtiyaz's experiences have involved. So I'm just going to share my screen now and play this video. As I said, really very keen to make sure that this is something that you can all see. Bear with me. Share my screen. Can everyone hear that?
Yes.
Nobel Peace Prize for 2014 is to be awarded to Kailash Satyarthi for the struggle against suppression of young people and children.
There is no greater violence than to deny the dreams of our children. I refuse to accept that the laws and constitutions are unable to protect our children. Today is the time for every child to have the right to life. I refuse to accept that the shackles of slavery can ever be more stronger than the quest for freedom. I refuse to accept here.
Getting a greeting like this is all the reward Kailash Satyarthi needs for freeing these children from a life of slavery. He tries to give these kids the childhood they missed.
Do you think these kids see you as a Nobel Peace Prize winner?
Oh, I don't think they see me as friend or brother or something like father. I have looked into their frightened and exhausted eyes. I've held their injured bodies and I have felt their broken spirits. I refuse to accept that children belonging to certain sections of society are born to work for others at the cost of their childhood and freedom and education. If the children are exploited, if the children are deprived from their childhood in any part of the world cannot live in peace. The world cannot be human.
It's not often the two winners of the Nobel Peace Prize get together, but it happened yesterday when President Obama met Kailash Satyarthi. They were joined by 3 children who were rescued from child trafficking and forced marriage.
You cannot live in isolation. All the problems and solutions are interconnected. And so the problem of child labor in any part of the world is your problem.
Satyarthi organizes raids with local police, but sometimes employers are tipped off and waiting for him armed.
But I have been attacked many times in my life.
You had a gun to your head?
Literally here.
This is dangerous work, freeing these kids.
Somebody has to pay the cost for freedom. It does not come on plate. So if not me, then who else will do? Nobel Prize.
Who won the Nobel Prize, he asks. Their reply, all of us kids.
It's good. Every single minute matters. Every single child matters. Every single childhood matters.
So thank you. Hopefully that was all fine and you could, and thank you very much. What an inspirational story. Even better, we have the man himself. Very exciting to have you here, Kailash Satyarthi. Thank you for joining us. And what a story. I've spent this afternoon deep in your story, and I can't wait to hear from your man yourself. So please introduce us, tell us what you've been thinking about and working about, and what you'd like to tell this audience of procurement professionals.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, my dear sister Neha. Thomas, if you allow, I can call you Brother Thomas. dear children, sisters and brothers, I heard that some of your family members are also attending this meeting. But let me tell you one thing, that I am so excited because this meeting is the manifestation of girls' power. The two girls, one is little one, like a spark, and the spark does not have limit. It began to enlighten her own father. I'm talking about Thomas' daughter. I think that her name is Maya. Good. And the second girl is Neha, of course, who is a corporate leader, but I always consider as a moral leader as well. In such a young age, she has shown her moral leadership in the industry and in businesses. I can see on the screen 81 participants. Let me tell you, this is not just a number or the participants. These are 181 rays of hope. These are 181 scripts of willingness, of consciousness to address the serious problem of child labor in the world. I expect that these rays of hope, these scripts of willingness are transformed into 181 resolves, strong commitments, and urgent actions, concrete actions. I was asked to say something about my journey. I'm not going to speak much about it. I was born in a modest family in central India. My parents had a dream that I should become an engineer, the first one in the family and relatives. I did it. I taught in the university, but I followed my heart. I followed my passion for children. It was very difficult. Today, you are paying me so much love and respect. But I could recall 50 years ago or 45 years ago, when I was talking to the people about the problem of child labor, the exploitation and abuses of children during my engineering university time and later on. They laughed at me and said that, what are you talking about? This is very common. Poor children have to work. They have to help families. Very difficult. People did not want to listen because it was a non-issue. Today, I am pleased that my dream to eradicate child labor, slavery, and trafficking of children is not my dream. It is the collective dream of millions and millions of people across the world. And I see that dream in your hearts. I can just tell one story. Some years ago, I went to rescue a group of people, children, women, and men, who lived in intergenerational slavery. Children were born and grew up there. Their parents were born and grew up and forcibly married with one another family's children, and it went on. It was a tough task because they were working in a stone quarry that was owned by a stronghold politician. Somehow, when we rescued them, we were rushing. We conducted this rescue operation very early in the morning, around 5 o'clock. So I asked children to sit in my car, and adults were sitting in a truck. When I was driving that car very fast, because it's always a risky proposition, I lost 2 of my colleagues. One was shot dead and one was beaten to death. I do have scars and injuries and pain in many parts of my own body. So we have to rush it fast. These children were traumatized. They have never seen cars, they have never seen roads, they have never seen buildings. I wanted to ease them a little bit, and I asked them to eat some bananas which were lying in the back of the car. I was insisted them to take the bunch of banana and eat. They have never seen banana. But somehow I persuaded them to take out and to take 1 banana each. So I heard one child was murmuring and asking his colleague, "What kind of onion is it?" Another boy touched that banana and then said that neither it's a potato. What is this? They have not seen anything else than potato or onion. Even then I insisted to just eat that banana. And after 5 minutes or so, I noticed that the children were trying to eat banana without peeling it. I was almost in tears because I realized that what kind of stupid I am. I did not teach them how to eat banana because they have never seen banana before. So I taught them. Some of them liked it. Some of them just threw it away. But after another 5-10 minutes, I suddenly felt a hand on my shoulder from a girl who was sitting just beside me. And she asked loudly, "Oh man, why didn't you come earlier? Why didn't you come earlier?" That was her faith, not in me, but in the humanity. Because she has experienced that death of her younger son in her lap without any medication. She has also seen that how her mother was being raped and then her father wanted to save his wife and he was beaten and burned with cigarettes. And that was the first day when the girl was challenging, demanding, expecting, having some hope in the humanity that somebody should come to help them. Her name was Devli. Devli's question, my dear sisters and brothers, is not for me alone. That was not the question asked many years ago. This stands the same today. What stops us? What stops us? Are we so poor? Are we so resourceless? Are we so cruel that we cannot listen to this voice of children in the world? And one day, dear friends, Devli got some education in our ashram. When she went back, she had a resolve that no child in her neighborhood would be working. All children must be attending school. She found a high school pass young man and urged him to teach all the children in the community, about 36 children. Devli traveled with me to United Nations General Assembly, where we organized an event for education for all children. That was just before the Millennium Development Goals. She stood up on the dais. Several prime ministers, presidents, heads of the UN agencies were sitting and listening to her. She told her story. And she again challenged. She said that, I don't think that the people are so poor. You look so healthy, she said. You look so beautiful. You are so white people. I never seen so many white people in my lifetime. And I was translating. She was an innocent child. And then she asked that, sir, madams, queens, kings, if a girl like me can ensure that no child is left behind, no child is left out, every child must get education, and I did it. What about all of you? That was her challenge again to all those 176 people who are attending this meeting. Why can't we do it? Imtiyaz told his story. When I went to rescue Imtiyaz and other children that day in a dark, clumsy, small workshop, he was doing some embroidery work on a beautiful silk piece of cloth. And when he was brought, he said that, I don't know that who is using it, who will use it, where will it go. It was for export, I knew. For bride costumes, bride gowns. I told him, and he said, can my elder sister ever touch these kind of clothes in her life? I have come across many children in the remotest parts of Ivory Coast and Ghana with bruises and scars on their bodies, working in cocoa beans. And when I asked them, how do you like chocolate? I was ashamed when 15, 14-year-old boys and girls said that they have never heard of chocolate, they have never tasted chocolate in their lifetime. These are the challenges. This is the curse on humanity. This is something which is a black spot on the face of humankind. It is not simply poverty. It is an utter failure of civilization, constitutions, cultures, religions, I would say, parliaments. Why our children are sold and bought like animals? Why they are building wealth for others at the cost of their own childhood freedom and education? 160 million children belong to those communities who are poor, who are deprived, who don't have sanitation facilities, who are uneducated or less educated, who do not have medical facilities and support. Their children are pushed into child labor. 160 million child laborers means 160 million empty seats in the classrooms. 160 million jobless adults, because every single child laborer is working at the cost of one adult's job. An adult has to pay the price for a child's work. That adult could be his own father, mother. This is the vicious circle of poverty, illiteracy, and child labor, and that has to be broken. Dear friends, you have a very important position. You can play a very important role. I have read an article written by Neha, who says that there is no question whether something like that, I can't recall it. I think it was in Forbes magazine or somewhere, that it is not needed that we have to debate whether child labor exists in supply chain. It is a truth, bitter truth. Today we have to think, not that if child labor exists or not in supply chains, we have to figure out where they are. We have to figure out what could be done, what has to be done now with a sense of urgency to take a moral responsibility. And why this child labor exists. When we are talking of so many children and child labor is increasing, before pandemic and after pandemic, we have a lot of estimations that there would be additionally 40 to 50 million children pushed into child labor in the end of this year, 2022. It does not mean then that the number of billionaires have come down. It has increased every second, third day. So what we need is compassion. I always say that we have to globalize compassion. We have globalized economies and markets and procurements and supplies. We have a globalized knowledge, information, technologies. This is the high time to revisit ourselves, to introspect and see what is lacking. Today we are struggling for our own survival of planet. We are struggling to find solution for the survival and sustainability of societies and cultures and planet. Something is wrong somewhere. I'm not talking about just being sympathetic. It is good to be sympathetic. It is good to have empathy in you. When you feel the suffering of others and react somehow, you are sympathetic. But when you feel the suffering of others as your own suffering, then you have empathy. That is even better. But the innermost circle is compassion. That means when you feel the pain, the sufferings of others as your own suffering, with a drive to alleviate that suffering, to end that suffering as your own suffering, your own problem. That is compassion. We need compassionate politics. We need compassionate societies. We need compassionate faith institutions. And today, dear friends, I am calling you, we need compassionate businesses, compassionate corporates, compassionate supply chains, compassionate procurement. You feel the suffering of those children as your own children. Whose children are Devlis? Whose children are Imtiyaz? Whose children are working in mica mines? Whose children are working in cocoa fields? They are all our children. They are all our children. We have to evolve. We have to build that feeling. We have to learn from this pandemic that no problem can be seen and solved in isolation in the world. We are so interconnected. Problems and solutions are so interconnected and so interdependent that we have to help each other and build that deeper sense of cooperation, and that can come only through compassion. Dear friends, I ask you a few things. We have seen that how compassionate business leaders in many industries have been able to take the leadership as champions for the cause of children, for the cause of child labor. And we have seen the good results. We have seen the decrease of child labor in micro minings, where we are making interventions, and we can talk sometime a little more, but you can find out on the websites and other places that how the number of child laborers and child slaves in mica mining has decreased over the years in India by way of community mobilization, community sensitization and involvement, but more importantly, through the partnership of some of the American companies, some of the European companies. They were sensitive about their supply chain management. We partnered with them. We have seen the decrease of child laborers and child slaves in South Asian carpet industry. According to US DOL's reports in the past, the number was over 1 million, but that has decreased to hardly 200,000 over the last 20 years or so. This was possible through the enlightened, the awakened, the active procurers as well as suppliers, and the partnership with organizations of my foundation and others. We have seen the result by building a new system, what is known as good weave now in carpet industry. So we have seen positive results in it. Awareness about the problem is here, but how to spread that awareness in the entire community of procurers? Pledging is a great initiative, because once you pledge, you put some moral obligation, some moral responsibility that you are supposed to take up something. But it is not enough. We have to go beyond that. How we have seen in India, when we worked with number of exporters and importers of textile industry and garment industry, we found that many of those people who were employing children in the long third tier, fourth tiers of supply chain, we found that they were not aware that there are laws against child labor. Some of them, you will be surprised to know. They were never sensitized by anyone. Though there was a board outside their workshops that there is no child labor is illegal, but they have no sensitization about it. No orientation, no education. We had series of workshops with them and found that if they are sensitized, we can definitely make them our partners. They have to learn that it is not good for them. If you have compassionate production and compassionate supply, means you are enhancing morality in the society. You are making a better image of your company. You are having a much active and much responsible leadership in your boardrooms. You are going to make your consumers happier, cleaner, fairer. And you are going to make this world a better place. So, dear friends, when you are aware, when you are, you have already acknowledged the problem, then don't wait for anyone. Take actions. Now, when you go back from here, that would be your great contribution to make our world a sustainable and better place. You can start by showing championships in your own pockets, in your own industries, in your own regions. That is very much possible. We have seen great results in the past, as I said, in many industries. today's meeting, I'm sure, will help in igniting that spark which was brought by these two powerful, passionate girls. Before thanking you, I would remember that when I was invited to deliver my acceptance speech at the Nobel podium in Oslo, I lost my speaking notes on my papers. That was very common with me. I'm sorry, because I am not so formal person. I feel that this is a big family. We live in a world which has to be considered as a global family. So what to hide with, or what to think and then do something very precisely and calculatedly in your family. So I'm talking to you as my family members. So I did the same thing there. So suddenly I remember, I recalled a story which I read in my childhood. There was a heavy fire broken out in jungle. All animals and birds, including king of jungle, lion, was rushing for a safer place, leaving the jungle. And King Lion noticed that a tiny hummingbird was flying straight towards the flames. He was surprised, he was shocked. And he shouted, "What are you doing? You will die." She said, "Sir, I am going to extinguish this fire because I was born and brought up here in this jungle." He said, "Don't preach, come back. How can you extinguish this fire?" She replied, "Sir, look at my beak. I am carrying a drop of water. I am doing my bit. I am doing my bit." My dear sisters and brothers, I am trying to do my bit. And I am calling upon that hummingbird inside each one of you. You are not simply money minting machines. Of course, you are working for profits and prosperities, but you are the change makers in your own way. You are the fathers of someone, you are the mothers of someone, you are sisters and brothers of someone, you are grandparents of someone. And at least you were a child one time. And I'm calling that child inside you. All these children are your children. You can definitely save their lives, give back them their childhood and freedom and future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This may be a Zoom call, but I'm going to applaud, and I think everyone should as well. Thank you, Kailash. That was very, 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 very important and a really important message. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully you will stick around for a few questions because there will be plenty as well. As I said, we would love to have people's comments. I mean, the chat has been whirring away. There's lots of ideas and thoughts and put in there, but I'd like to ask a few questions to the panel. So we'd like to come to all of you. If you feel like you've got something to share, then please do, and that involves all of you within this. So many questions I could ask, but I have to say there's one that burns most brightest, and particularly when I read your Forbes article, Neha, there was something in there that has been part of my life for the last 10, 15 years looking at responsible sourcing. There's plenty of momentum on human rights, there's legislation coming out and everything else, but we're fundamentally addicted to audit and data and methods that clearly don't really work, honestly. So what can we now do as business? How can we revolutionize? How can we change? How can we not just work harder and actually change what we do? I might come to you, Neha, first. What are your thoughts about what we can do to transform the way we work, not just try a little bit harder?
Thanks, Oliver. And I just wanted to start by saying thank you to Kailash ji.
Your sound is a little bit distorted. Maybe it's just me, but
Okay. Can you hear me okay now?
no, we can't. No. Do you want to come back in and go back out again? And I'll come to, maybe Thomas, would you mind picking up that question?
Yeah, I loved what you said, Kailash. You talked about community mobilization. That was one of the sentences, and I think that is what we also need to engage in. And I think, as you say, we are sitting in I happen to sit in Germany, and we have assessments which are, online based and based on averages and theories and self-declarations, and you don't get to what really happens on the ground. I think to get to that, you need to partner with people who are there, who understand the broader context, and it's a totally different degree of engagement that requires than what we have typically done. And I think the examples around the carpet industry in Southeast Asia or the mica industry, we don't necessarily all have to try to boil the ocean and try to address all issues, but each of our companies have a area where they have a natural big impact. And I think for that, we need to, as Kailash you say, we need to show the compassion and find ways of engaging. And that requires local community mobilization. And I love that word, because I think it's probably in many groups a common word, but it's not one that has really been featuring much in corporate settings so far.
Yeah, I agree. Neha,
Yeah, can you hear me now?
No, you're still a bit like a robot. Maybe if you come out of the meeting, come back in again. Something that I picked up, Kailash, was your idea of globalizing compassion. I love that. We're very proud as business people of globalizing everything, aren't we? But globalizing compassion, it makes a huge amount of sense. I think that's an interesting concept. Compassionate procurement. Again, I think that's something that we can be picking up about. Perhaps as a sustainable procurement pledge, I think this is almost something that I think we need to be championing, this idea of compassionate procurement, and actually think about practically what that means. So yes, no, I thought that was very interesting. Kailash, is there anything particularly that you think procurement leaders could do now? What could they do today or tomorrow? What sort of things could they be doing that perhaps they don't realize that they can do to actually take action now? Any thoughts on that? You might need to come off mute. Thank you.
Today and just now, they can take some sort of commitment inside them that tomorrow onwards they are going to take up something, or today, because in India it is already late, so we can't do it now, but today, you can start even today. So one thing is that commit yourself that you will do at least one thing. And the one thing is to send a word across your suppliers, but before that, your own staff, your own board members, that when we talk of sustainability, in addition to global warming and ecological issues, equally important is the future of children. Because these 160 million children are not only, as I said, the empty seats in the classrooms, but they are also missed out climate actions. Young people are now involved in the climate actions, but young people are trapped into mining and factories, then you miss the climate action. So to send this message across, that this is also in our agenda, one of the key agendas. And then engagement with your own people, your own staff, sensitization and engagement, and then it should trickle down to suppliers. Some training would be needed for those quality control officers or procurement officers on the ground. So a series of activities, workshops for their own sensitization and capacity building could be organized, and perhaps the organizations like ours can help in taking it up. So they have to be engaged. That the sense of ownership, sense of engagement is very much needed. And that requires to know that we are not doing it because of any pressure. We are doing on our own because this is good for the image, good for the culture of the organization, of the company. So that could be done immediately. That could be started immediately with some sort of small note, could be sent out to everyone that we have attended this event, this evening, this meeting, and we are going to take it up.
Good. A very wise point. And we will help that. We will make sure that the recording of this and the tools needed to act will be very clear for everyone to forward on. And if anyone's leaving this meeting and not sharing the story of this meeting, then there's frankly something wrong with you. So please do that. And thank you, Kailash. We've got lots of questions, so we'll go through them. Like Desiree, I'll come to you in just a second. If you'd like to put your hand up, you can do that in the reactions button. You can put your hand up and want to ask a question. We will come to you. We've got plenty of time for questions, so we will get that. Have we got Neha back?
I hope so.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. I really wanted your thoughts on that question, so I'm glad you could get.
Okay, so I think, Oliver, I'm just going to summarize because I see so many questions that I think the first step, as I said in the article, is we start with an assumption without blame that this problem exists, number one, in any industry, whether you're in consumer products, in life sciences, and so forth. I think the next question that we all can do in that first action Kailash ji is asking is all of our companies have made pledges, but what is it in those sustainability forums within our procurement departments? What's really asking those questions? What is the level of investment that we've made in terms of due diligence, in terms of audits? Because I can immediately almost assure you that the numbers required to make a difference, we are probably only at a fraction of that. But at least bringing up that conversation, because again, right now, a lot of the attention in the room is towards climate, rightfully so, but making this through all of our awareness, a top priority, first in those sustainability and procurement functions, but also using our voice to make it a top priority, even in those higher level, C-level board discussions on ESG overall, saying, what are we doing in terms of human rights, child labor? I think the third thing, we have a really wonderful colleague who has a lot of experience on the call as an audience member, really this idea of relying on voluntary due diligence, certification. Do not assume that those are sufficient. Of course, it's a checkbox and we all must do it, but that is not going to be, again, the level of investment, what's happening, it has to be kind of really changed. We will continue to do these reactive sort of measures in terms of audits and certifications, but don't assume that's kind of table stakes, and in fact might give us a false sense of security that everything is okay in our tier 2 and tier 1 supply chain. Somebody brought up the point, and I think this is the opportunity, working and co-innovating with many companies. There's many startups, there's GEP, it doesn't really matter who, but really thinking about where does data exist? For instance, in your raw materials and ingredients, what exists in your spend categories, and then below that, triangulating that information with where there's high risk areas in supply chain, and then being able to, in a data-driven use of technology, although technology in and of itself is not the panacea for all of this, how can we create, again, more awareness and structured activities towards eliminating these risk areas? David from Estee Lauder is on the call, and he's done some of that work without technology, but just through creating these very detailed SWAT teams through his action and others, to bring awareness, to bring action in the community. And now what I'm suggesting is, if all of our corporations, especially those, many of whom have deep pockets and availability of finance, spend the money, put the people, expertise, create public-private partnerships with the nonprofits and universities, and then work with innovative solutions, either internally or with providers, and figure out how to better take vast amounts of data and create that visibility and actions in the supply chain, I think there is tremendous opportunity to make meaningful impact in child labor, human rights, and then across many issues around sustainability. So I wanted to address a lot of questions, but
no, that's
I
fine.
hope I did.
We've got plenty of time. And there was one particular thing in your Forbes article I rang true, and I think you've mentioned it there, is this idea that we are constantly trying to get to a point where we can say our supply chain is free of something or zero something, rather than accepting that it fundamentally exists in there and trying to reward finding it.
Yes.
Be hunting for a zero rather than hunting for the child labor, and that seems to be a sort of mindset that I think we need to change. So I loved your point.
That's perfectly said. Finding and rewarding, finding the problems, and then being the corporations who take the lead is really what we should be rewarding. Like David from Estee Lauder, their work, it's not eliminated, but there's tremendous impact that has already been created.
Excellent. If David or anyone else on this call would like to add something or put some comments in, please do raise your hand. If you go into the reactions thing, you can put your hand up. I also will be having a look at the chat in a second. Desiree, who has been fundamental in putting this together and is a part of the SB2B team, what do you want to share your thoughts or questions?
Thank you, Oliver, and thank you so much. Truly inspirational session, just for myself as a procurement professional as well. And there was one question, Oliver, just that popped up in the chat. I hope that I pronounce your name right. It's Metap, I think. But the question is, what we need to ask is how we can redesign the supply chain. And talks about the tiered approach that puts suppliers into hierarchical categories, boxes, which results in lack of visibility, transparency, traceability, but also results in lack of responsibility. And so my question, listening to all the points that you've made, and also a previous webinar that we did last week on social procurement and integrating social enterprises into our supply chain and sourcing strategies. One of the comments that was made there was about actually the way we do category management is redundant. And I thought, are we actually, and listening now what you were saying about the investment that's needed, the collaboration between all these integral parties, are we not actually saying that we've come to a point where that's what we're doing? We're actually needing to make a more fundamental change and shift in the way that we are doing procurement, working in our supply chains, working with suppliers.
Great. Thomas, I think as a CPO, you perhaps pick that one up?
Well, it's one of these topics that I guess keeps a lot of people busy, and I'm so happy Ute is actually here on the line as well, because she defended category strategies last time, and the notion is of course not the tool, it is what are you doing with the tool. And of course, if you want to do great category strategies, you need to make sure it includes the relevant sustainability, human right dimensions relevant for your particular area. So I'm definitely of the school of thought that category strategy is at all not dead. We just need to move to version 2.0 or 3.0, the more enhanced version, and it needs to include the compassion of how do we use this incredible power that we hold economically to also have a positive impact. And again, Spider-Man's uncle was the one who said it best, with great power comes great responsibility, and I do think he was right. So category strategy is here to stay. We're just going to enhance it.
So we need a compassion lens over category strategy, like a sustainability lens, like every other lens that we need to. Okay, good point. Kunal, hi, good to see you again. David, sorry, I'll come to you in a second, but Kunal, would you like to share your thoughts or question?
Yeah, I'll just catch up on the point on category strategy as well, because I also pointed out this last time as well. One of the things which is quite important in category strategy, if we are doing it, that we should know the right price or right cost and what is behind the cost. And we should forget, or not forget, but we should be aware about the competitiveness, but we should be aware of where the competitiveness is coming from. So that is important in a category strategy, to understand what are the different elements and how we apply it and how competitive is that environment. For example, if a supplier is selling cheap ore, then why is he or she able to sell so cheap when compared to others? So it has to be digged further into. So category management is really, I mean, for me, I'm a category manager, but I see the value which we can bring into the entire supply chain, and especially bringing back to the topic of the day for the child labor, that how a particular mine or how a particular source is able to offer better conditions than the others. So we have to dig into it, and we have to stay in the category management so that we bring our power along with it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Low cost is an alarm bell, isn't it? And that we need to understand. Very good point. David, your thoughts?
Thank you. I think a real important category is community and children decision making and opportunity for that to happen. And also really understanding the dynamics. Say in the micromining, which we've worked with Kailash's team for 16 years now, the actual adults are terrified to speak out. They can't speak out. You know, after dozens of years of being really held down and etc. It's now the children that are shouting out, thousands of children working together as one. And that's the beauty of the work that Kailash's team doing, is these people have a very powerful voice. The government at every level now in the district block, even the state now are speaking together. And I think another area is what Kailash's team's done. Yes, they've worked with Estée Lauder companies for 16 years, but it's an India-based community solution. We shouldn't look for international, make it fit ideas. It has to go back to the community. So thank you, everyone.
Excellent. And collaboration in those communities is critical. And that means collaborating with companies you didn't realize are working in those communities. We need to get out of our industry silos, don't we? And realize that you can support a community that makes a lot of different products, not just the same chocolate bar or the same beer or whatever it might be. A very, very good point. I wanted to actually really pick up that question of specific industries. So I think a few of you have probably seen in the last week, Nestle have agreed to sort of pay farmers more and in order to sort of try and prevent child labour. Kailash, and perhaps we can start with you, but others, is that a sort of solution that feels right? Is that going to work? Is that part of the plan, do you think, Kailash? If you're there and not on mute.
Yes, that should be welcomed, definitely. But we have experienced in Ivory Coast and Ghana with the cocoa bean farmers that the international market does not support them enough for their raw material, for the beans, raw beans. So the price of raw beans in the market sometimes is not able to give them proper sustenance and sustainability both to keep on working on it. Some of them are still working because they don't have any other options. Some of them are changing their crops, and they are moving towards other cash crops, including oil palm cultivation and so on. So I have traveled across many villages and communities in Ivory Coast and Ghana. So giving more wages for the workers on the ground and farmers, including some sort of incentives for children in schools, that should not be just run by one or another company. That should be taken up by the entire industry. As we worked hard with Senator Harkin. Senator Harkin was the champion, and we worked very closely for many years, for almost 30 years or so, including in this initiative in chocolate industry. And International Cocoa Initiative has been formed, and I was one of the founding board members in the beginning, but later on I left. So the idea was that it could not be done only by one or two companies. All the chocolate companies, if not all, major chocolate companies have to take responsibility in this regard, and then we have to create a kind of level playing field where one company should not be isolated. And that is the major challenge, that how a few companies can take the championship with regard to addressing those issues as prevention, as the remedy, as well as rehabilitation, development activities in the area. Only then it is possible. And then the government has to take some responsibility. Without them, it is not possible, because there are so many other things. International community has to show their genuine commitment towards this cause. As we know that more than half of the child laborers in the world come from sub-Saharan Africa alone, almost 87 million out of 160 million. So that is a serious challenge, because it is deep-rooted with the racial discrimination and other kind of discrimination which is still prevailing in the society, the institutional discrimination, and sometimes the weak governance, sometimes the local corruption. There is no access to education or quality education. So combination of these all factors have to be addressed. But more important is to engage the society and the children and young people themselves, as David pointed out, David Hircock. We work very closely, and he knows. Actually, he's a kind of ambassador of thousands of those children who were freed from child labor and slavery and child marriages and trafficking, and now they are the change makers. They are the champions for the entire community. So engaging the young people is equally very important.
Excellent. Yeah, very good point. What can companies do to work with you, Kailash, in your team? What does that look like? What does it mean to be supporting your work? What does it look like in practice?
So awareness is one thing that will help as prevention of this problem. Secondly, that has been told a couple of times, that community engagement, the awareness within the industry, within the supply chain, but also awareness in the communities, and then identifying the problems communities are facing. Sometimes, as we have seen in the mica mining area, that there are many good government schemes, educational schemes, but they do not reach to those communities where the children are held in child labor and bondage in mica mining area. So how to build that bridge between the official schemes and programs with the community. So these things are also possible, which we can do. Then training and capacity building of your officers and professionals is also possible. Sensitization is very important. Once they take a kind of personal interest in it, only then it would be possible. That is, so some of those things could be done. Another thing is the rehabilitation. Some programs, once the children are withdrawn from child labor or trafficking in those areas, which are the source areas or supply areas of or procurement areas of different products, then the companies and civil society can also work hand in hand in ensuring that children who are withdrawn from slavery, child labor at different age groups, they could be given education or some kind of rehabilitational support.
Excellent, thank you. Another question, Neha, I might come to you with this one. How do you kind of identify suppliers? How do you segment and see where the risks might be? How do you know which resources or which ingredients or which countries or which geographies can be most risky? And a second part to that question is, how do we stop people thinking that it doesn't exist in Europe, or it doesn't exist on my doorstep, or it doesn't, because it exists everywhere, doesn't it? So how do we help people understand that?
No, that's great. Maybe I'll talk first on, Oliver, on the second point, which is, I think we sitting here in the US and Europe think it is a problem in sub-Saharan Africa, which of course Kailash mentioned, it's very significant there. It is in India, it's in these more developing regions, but it actually does exist in really on the back of our doorsteps. We might not see it, but it absolutely exists. And I think that's again, a lot of just awareness, reading, supporting, and getting more deeply involved with Kailash's organization or others that are doing the work. I think that's just something we can all do. And I think, again, coming back to my original point about as supply chain procurement professionals, we are right in the middle. We are probably the most crucial individuals in corporate America to affect change and even to start conversations at a more, even in the boardrooms and our C-suite executives to bring this attention and make this a priority. Coming back to your original point about how do we know it exists, I think the point is, and Anjali just sent a good link on the, I think, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and there's many of those, which really just understanding and studying, what sort of ingredients, what raw materials, what geographies are at risk, and then understanding and almost triangulating back that you might not be a direct buyer of some of those materials, but it probably does exist in different parts of your supply chain. And that's where I think, had this been an easy problem to solve, many of us would have solved it. But I think with the era that we're living in 2022, and the advent of so many options and solutions around bringing data, mining it, putting predictive capabilities, being able to report on it in a real-time basis, there's so many more opportunities to be able to solve the problem. But I think the biggest challenge is who's willing to do it, who's willing to put in that hard work with corporations and companies, providers like GEP or others, who's willing to do the hard work, who's willing to say this is a priority and we're going to kind of innovate those solutions. I think that is the bigger challenge. And that's why these conversations like the one we're having today, what the work the Sustainable Procurement Pledge is doing, and many others to really elevate this conversation is really, really important for all of us to continue this conversation well after this meeting is done, and make this a priority within our corporations and put the, again, financial and human talent investment and best thought leadership to how we can create real practical solutions in each industry, pharmaceuticals, in cosmetics, in retail, and so on and so forth.
Excellent, excellent. So final few minutes, I'm just going to ask everyone to just perhaps share one final point about, and I want to get this really practical if we can, what do we think that we as an audience can go away and do? And I mean today, tomorrow, in the next week. And I think certainly from a Sustainable Procurement Pledge perspective, I think I speak for the whole SPP team, that I think this session is going to mean that we're going to have to do something, and we're going to have to put something together, and we're going to have to make this part of our work more formally. I think this idea of compassionate procurement, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn for the team here, but I think we need to actually really pull something together practically for all 6,000 of us and more that are coming together. So we will, everyone that's listening to this will get a practical toolkit of some sorts in some period of time so that you can actually get on and do something. And so I want to pick up on that. Thomas, just a final thought from you.
I just want to thank everybody for being here and I guess carry that light and that beacon of hope and action that I think also that Kailash has started with us. So I'm really thankful. I think it's an important conversation, one that we maybe should have had earlier, like why are we coming now? But it's heartbreaking to reflect on some of these things, but I think we have now the chance to also change immediately what we're going to do moving forward. So I'm certainly going to pledge also to make sure that we have this as part of our journey moving forward. And I guess thanks Kailash for spending the time. We have to say we are really, really thankful, and it's not often we get a real celebrity from a humanitarian dimension to talk with us as family. So I just really want to thank you for offering your time, and I know you have a big agenda ahead of you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Kailash, when you said that you're someone who forgets his notes, that made me feel great as well, because I'm like that as well. So it's possible to be someone who can talk and not always be as organized. So I'm very glad, as the team will know and agree with me. Kailash, final thought from you. As I said, we got this audience here who I suspect is really now thinking about what they can practically do. What's your final thought to this group?
I'm feeling more excited and motivated and rather empowered to see so many people are talking on this issue, as I said at the outset. So I'm sure that out of those 126 people who are listening now, many of them who have left, or some of them who will watch this video later on because it is recorded, they can somehow express their willingness and ideas to take it forward, and SPP and GEP can definitely collect some of that intentional or willing notes and try to convene a small group and have more discussion in the future for more concrete actions, because you are all professionals and you know, I tell you that you know the problems and you know the solutions. And what is needed is to take action. What is needed to feel a sense of deeper personal and collective responsibility. That would be my call. And I can see, because we have worked with Estee Lauder closely, and we have worked with the GEP closely in the past, not only my dear sister Neha, but brother Subhasji and Rupaji and JT. I saw the glimpse of JT some seconds ago. So all of you can definitely have shown and have proven that you can bring compassion in business, and that could be expanded. That should be the beginning of expansion of collective, compassionate leadership in the businesses. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Imtiyaz, if you're still there, I hope what you've heard has made you feel good about what we intend to do. And I promise that we won't let you or Kailash down, because as I said, that's really what we need to do. Kailash, I'm going to be a bit cheeky and say, would you be willing to come back in however long and come back and speak to us again in maybe whatever long term, and assess what we've done since this meeting and sort of hold us to account a little bit about what we've committed to here? Would you mind doing that in the future?
I would love to do, not as the elder of the family, but one of the family members. I won't talk of accountability, but definitely we can assess time to time together, and we can move together. And that togetherness is the key. And that is something we can learn from this pandemic, that we have to find the solutions together.
We do.
And I would love to come.
Excellent. Well, you're very welcome. Your family now.
And I have a place to stay in. I have so many places, but one of the places I liked is Neha's and Subhas and Rupa's great apartment in New York. So normally we stay there with my wife, and sometimes my son and daughter-in-law. They also stayed once. So we can meet there.
Excellent, excellent. Well,
I'm talking as the host, inviting people to that apartment instead of talking as the ghost.
Well, you've got 104 people turning up to that apartment now, so as I said, I'm sure that they'll be very happy with that. Thank you, Neha. Thank you, Imtiyaz. Thank you, Kailash. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, everyone that's participated. We have got some absolute gold dust in the chat. This is only the beginning. As I said, I think we're going to commit to globalizing and compassion. I think in procurement, I think we can commit to that. Thank you all for your time. I'm off to show this video to my daughter, who's 11 years old and has been nagging me from the moment she's been born almost to do better. So I think we can all do that. Thank you, everybody. And
thank you very much.
Your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kailash. Thank you, Imtiyaz.
Thank you, Neha.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Imtiyaz, you are amazing. Thank you.
Yep. We won't let you down. Thank you, everyone.